All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here and checking the video out. Today we're going to talk about Ibogaine. And specifically, I want to introduce a framework to understand Ibogaine not simply as an addiction interrupter, but as a compound with the potential to repair reward system dysfunction across diagnostic boundaries. So this perspective grows out of an emerging consensus in neuroscience that many psychiatric conditions share a deeper circuit-bound injury rather than being isolated and unrelated disorders. Right, so let's dive into it. So the central hypothesis of this work is that ibogaine may recalibrate reward system circuitry by influencing both dopaminergic and glutamatergic regulation. These two systems reshape how we learn from reward, how we anticipate outcomes, and how we assign value to our experiences. And one of the most important pieces of this puzzle is ibogaine's ability to induce the creation of what's called GDNF, a growth factor associated with dopaminergic repair and plasticity. And when GDNF levels rise, the reward system seems to enter a temporary reopening of learning windows. And that window appears to allow people to break out of rigid, maladaptive loops and behaviors. So why does the reward system matter specifically? When I talk about or hear about reward system injury, my mind tends to go toward addiction, and that's because of my history and my education in addiction. But the reality is there are multiple diagnoses that share disruptions in how reward is processed. There's addiction, there's also PTSD, there's OCD, and there's eating disorders. Just as a start, they've all been shown to involve impaired reward learning. So each of these conditions reshapes anticipation, salience or focus, and reinforcement. And they show these symptoms in their own way, sure, but reward dysfunction seems to be a common underlying thread. And this suggests that instead of treating these symptoms in isolation, we may need to target the shared circuitry underneath them. And Ibogaine gives us a rare opportunity to do just that because it seems like it works in just those areas. The mechanisms of action with Ibogaine are pretty complex, and we're just getting to learn a lot of it. A lot more study needs to be had before we truly understand what's going on. But across the studies, there are several actions that consistently emerge. The first is its induction of GDNF, which supports the dopaminergic neuron repair and may help to stabilize that reward function, healthy reward function. Second is that ibogaine influences the way glutamate functions in the brain as well. And that's important because glutamate helps us learn new information, right? It helps us unlearn old patterns as well, and it helps shape the connections between our neurons and our synapses, right? Third, ibogaine affects the proteins that allow dopamine to move around in and out of the neurons, for example. And by slowing this process for a short period, dopamine can circulate more freely in wider bounds and have a stronger influence overall on the reward system. And then finally, noribogaine, the long-acting metabolite, extends these neurochemical effects far beyond the acute experience. So it's not just during that day of the experience, it's not just the week surrounding, it's for an extended period, and it gives people a window that allows people to see this change unfold, as well as give them an opportunity to truly take advantage of it by employing other techniques. So all these mechanisms matter because they offer an explanation as to why Ibogaine seems to do what it does. By interrupting reinforcement loops, Ibogaine seems to have the potential to break compulsive cycles in addiction, anxiety-based disorders, and trauma-based reenactments. By reducing withdrawal and craving in addiction, it gives patients a physiological foothold to engage in their treatment rather than just having to fight for survival. And through plasticity, the same individuals might become more receptive to emotional regulation techniques, to cognitive restructuring, and to real identity level shifts because they have that window wide open to them. Not only that, but there's also growing speculation that the applicability of the GDNF factor to memory and motor circuit considerations open up an entirely new territory for future therapeutic models. It is important to note that Ibogaine is not without its risks, though. Uh, its inhibition of the ether-a-go-go channel can prolong the QT interval, which can send the heart into a fit, essentially. And this makes proper medical screening and monitoring non-negotiable. It has to be done. Neuroplasticity is also a consideration because it is not directionally neutral. You know, while we do gain the opportunity to reorganize toward healthier patterns, without structure, we also risk going into instability and leaning into the spiral, so to speak. Right now, most existing research remains observational. They're small samples, and they're pretty much all uncontrolled. They are all uncontrolled. We don't have enough standardized data right now. But these limitations don't erase Ibogaine's potential. It just demands that we exercise rigor, ethical caution, and develop some strong systems of care to move forward. And in moving forward, several pathways for progress are pretty clear. We need human controlled trials that quantify Ibogaine's impact on specific brain circuits rather than solely relying on subjective reports and surveys. We also need to pair Ibogaine studies with neuroimaging and molecular assays, and that will allow us to measure plasticity and dopaminergic repair directly. And because reward system dysfunction affects far more than addiction, and these implications affect far more than addiction, future work should explore Ibogaine's relevance for conditions involving memory deficit, motor neuron diseases, or motor neuron processes, and anything that has reinforcement-based pathology. In closing, the goal of this framework is really simple. It's meant to reposition Ibogaine not as an anomaly in the psychedelic space, but as a targeted intervention that may help repair the deepest layers of reward system injury. This perspective helps invite new research questions, new clinical models, and a more unified understanding of what psychiatric disorders actually are at a circuit level. And that's it. Thank you for your time, and thanks for checking the video out.